Hey, everyone out there on the road. Hope you're doing all right out there, whether you're behind the wheel, just finishing up a break, or maybe you're finally shutting it down for the night.
Yeah, things in the trucking world have been a little bit wild lately, to say the least.
Wild is putting it lightly, I think.
Mm.
I mean, between companies shutting down new tech, not quite living up to the hype, and all the changes with load boards, it's enough to make your head spin.
Exactly. So we wanted to take a deep dive into all of this and see if we can't make some sense of it all for you guys out there.
Right. We want to kind of connect the dots between these different things that are happening and help you figure out what it all means for your bottom line and, maybe even your peace of mind.
Because that's important too.
Absolutely. So we've got a lot to cover today. We're going to talk about what happened with LTI Trucking and that other company that just kind of disappeared,
Yeah, that was a strange one.
for sure. We'll also dig into why BP decided to back away from their big clean trucking push and what that might signal for the future of trucking technology.
Definitely. And then we'll tackle the whole load board situation with all the new verification stuff and try to sort out whether it's a good thing, a bad thing, or maybe a bit of both.
And finally, we'll wrap up by talking about how the changing seasons, especially now that spring is here, are impacting freight patterns and what opportunities that might create.
Sounds good. Let's get into it.
So first up, let's talk about these trucking company shutdowns. They've been kind of hard to miss lately.
Yeah, LTI Trucking Services closing down really shook things up, especially for those 250 drivers in the Midwest.
Yeah.
It came as a real surprise to a lot of people.
And what made it even more surprising was that they didn't file for bankruptcy right away. They
Right.
just sort of stopped operating.
Right, and that kind of leaves everyone hanging. What's going to happen to the drivers? What about the equipment? It creates a lot of uncertainty.
And then there's that other even bigger company that shut down too. I don't think they ever even released the name publicly.
No, they just kind of vanished into thin air. It's like one day they were there and the next day they were gone. Goof, exactly. Drivers showed up for work and the doors were locked. Nobody was answering phones. It was like a ghost town.
Talk about a shock. I can't imagine what those drivers must be going through.
I mean, it's their livelihood, their way of life that's suddenly been ripped away from them.
It really makes you think about how vulnerable you can be as a driver when your whole income depends on one company.
Absolutely. It's a good reminder to always be thinking about having a backup plan, whether that's building relationships with multiple brokers or maybe even exploring other ways to bring in some income.
So what do you think led to these shutdowns? I mean, was it just bad luck or were there other factors at play?
Well, the trucking industry is a tough business, especially right now. Spot rates and contract rates have been coming down quite a bit from their peaks.
Yeah, I've definitely been hearing that from a lot of drivers.
Right, and at the same time, the cost of everything else, fuel insurance, maintenance repairs, all of that stuff has just been going up and up.
It's like a perfect storm.
It is, and when you've got that kind of pressure coming from both sides, it's bound to squeeze some companies out of the market.
And it seems like there are just more trucks out there than there is freight to haul.
Yeah, remember back during the pandemic when everyone was ordering stuff online and there was a huge surge in demand for trucking?
Oh, yeah, it was crazy.
Well, a lot of new drivers and new companies came into the market to try to capitalize on that, but now that demand has cooled off, there's not enough freight to go around.
So it's like a supply and demand problem.
Exactly, and that's probably a big part of what's driving these shutdowns. Some companies just aren't able to survive in this kind of environment.
It's a real shame, though, especially for the drivers who are left holding the bag.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough situation, and it's important to look at it from different angles, the drivers who are out of a job, the company executives who might be blaming the economy or other factors, and then the industry analysts who might see this as a kind of correction.
It's complicated for sure.
Yeah. It is, but one thing's for certain, it's a reminder that the trucking industry is always changing, and you've got to be ready to adapt.
All right, well, let's move on to another big piece of news that's been making waves. BP scaling back their clean trucking efforts.
Yeah, this one was a bit of a head scratcher. I mean, after all the hype about electric and hydrogen trucks, BP decides to pull back from their investments.
I know, right?
Yeah.
What happened there?
Well, it seems like BP's new leadership just isn't convinced that clean trucking is going to be profitable in the near term.
Really, I thought everyone was on board with this whole green tech thing.
Well, there's always been some skepticism from truckers and fleet owners. I mean, a lot of them have concerns about the range of electric trucks and the lack of charging infrastructure and the cost of all this new technology.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's one thing to drive an electric car around town, but it's a whole different ballgame. We're talking about long-haul trucking.
Exactly. And it sounds like BP came to the conclusion that the transition to clean trucking is going to be a lot slower and a lot more expensive than they initially thought.
So they're basically saying it's not worth the investment right now.
Pretty much, they figure they can make more money sticking with their core business of oil and gas for now.
Well, that's kind of a bummer. I mean, I was hoping to see more electric trucks on the road soon.
I know, me too. But it's important to remember that this is just one company's decision. There are still a lot of other companies out there that are investing heavily in clean trucking.
That's true. Tesla is still pushing their semi-truck, and Nikola is trying to get back on track.
And there are a lot of startups out there developing new technologies, so it's not like the whole clean trucking movement is dead in the water.
That's good to hear.
But it does raise some interesting questions about the future of trucking technology. Is diesel going to be around for a lot longer than we thought? Will electric trucks ever really be practical for long-haul trucking?
Yeah, it's a lot to think about.
It is. And for you guys out there on the road, it's something to keep in mind when you're making decisions about what kind of truck to buy or lease or, even what kind of routes to run.
Right, because if diesel is going to be the dominant fuel for the foreseeable future, then maybe it doesn't make sense to invest in an electric truck just yet.
Maybe not, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on. The technology is constantly evolving, and who knows what the future holds.
All right, well, let's switch gears again and talk about something that's probably impacting you guys on a daily basis right now. All the new security measures on load boards.
Yeah, it seems like every time you log in, there's a new hoop to jump through.
Seriously, it's like they're trying to make it as difficult as possible to find a load.
Well, the load boards will tell you that it's all about security,
Yeah.
trying to prevent fraud and protect everyone involved.
But it can be really frustrating for drivers, especially owner-operators who are already drowning in paperwork.
I hear you. I mean, you're out there trying to make a living, and now you've got to jump through all these extra hoops just to access the loads you need.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
what exactly are they doing? I mean, what kind of new verification stuff are we talking about?
Well, it's a lot of things. They're doing real-time checks on your insurance to make sure it's valid. They're verifying your operating authority and your CDL. And some load boards are even talking about implementing two-factor authentication and facial recognition.
Facial recognition, really, that seems a bit much.
I know, right?
Mm.
But it's all part of this push to crack down on fraud. And, there has been a lot of fraud in the industry lately.
Like what kind of fraud?
Well, you've got double brokering, where someone illegally rebrokers a load to another carrier and pockets the difference.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
And then you've got ghost carriers. These are companies that are operating with outdated or invalid authority.
So they're basically operating illegally.
Exactly. And then you've got fake dispatchers who are trying to scam drivers out of their pay or even their loads.
Wow, that's scary.
It is, and it's costing the industry a lot of money, so the load boards are under a lot of pressure to clean things up.
So I guess I can see why they're doing all this extra verification stuff, but it still feels like a pain for honest drivers.
I agree. It's like you're being punished for the actions of a few bad actors.
Right. And there's always the potential for things to go wrong with these new systems.
Yeah, I mean, what happens if there's a glitch and your account gets locked out? Or what if there's a mistake in your paperwork and you can't get verified?
That would be a nightmare.
It would. So I think it's important for drivers to be proactive. Double check that all your documents are up to date, make sure your insurance is paid up, keep digital copies of everything just in case.
Good advice.
And, if your load board offers two-factor authentication, I would definitely recommend setting that up.
Yeah, that's a good idea. It adds an extra layer of security.
It does, and it can help to protect you from getting scammed.
Okay, well, let's move on to something a little less stressful.
Yep.
The arrival of spring.
Yes, springtime.
I know it's not just about the weather getting warmer. It also means changes for the trucking market.
That's right. Spring is a busy time for certain types of freight. Well, one of the biggest changes is the start of produce season down south, as fruits and vegetables start to ripen. The demand for refrigerated trucks goes way up.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
And that increased demand for reefers can actually have a positive impact on dry van rates, too.
Really? How so?
Well, as more trucks head south to haul produce, it can create a bit of a shortage of trucks in other parts of the country.
So the rates go up?
Exactly. And spring also marks the beginning of construction season in a lot of places.
So more demand for flatbeds and hotshots.
Yep. If you're hauling things like lumber, steel, or construction equipment, this can be a really good time of year.
Especially if you know where to go.
That's right. And on the flip side, you might see a loosening of capacity up north as the weather improves.
So rates might go down in those areas.
Possibly. It really just depends on where the demand is.
It's like the trucking market is constantly in flux.
It is. And that's why it's so important to stay informed, Keep an eye on the news, talk to other drivers, pay attention to what's happening in different parts of the country.
And be ready to adapt.
Exactly, because the more you know, the better decisions you can make about where to go and what kind of freight to haul.
All right, well, we've covered a lot of ground today, from company shutdowns to clean trucking to load board security to the impact of spring.
It's a lot to take in.
It is, but I think it's important to step back and look at the big picture for a minute. You know, what are all these different things telling us about the state of the trucking industry?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that the industry is going through a period of significant change.
Yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty out there.
There is, and it seems like that uncertainty is coming from all directions.
Like, what do you mean?
Well, we've got economic uncertainty with inflation and rising interest rates and the possibility of a recession.
Yeah, that's definitely a concern.
And then we've got technological uncertainty with all these new technologies coming online, but nobody's quite sure which ones are going to stick.
Like electric trucks and autonomous trucks and who knows what else.
Yeah, exactly. And then we've got regulatory uncertainty with the government constantly changing the rules and adding new regulations.
It's enough to make your head spin.
It is, and I think it's important for drivers to remember that they can't control everything.
Yeah, you can't control the economy or the government or the direction of technology.
But you can control how you respond to these changes.
That's true.
And I think that's where the real opportunity lies. You know, if you can be adaptable, if you can be proactive, if you can be willing to learn new things, then you can not only survive these changes, but you can actually thrive.
I like that, thrive.
It's all about mindset. You know, instead of being afraid of change, embrace it. See it as an opportunity to grow and improve.
That's good advice for anyone, really. Not just truckers.
It is, but I think it's especially important for truckers because you guys are on the front lines of all these changes.
Right, you're the ones who are out there dealing with the new technologies and the new regulations and this shifting economic landscape.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to be informed and be prepared and be willing to adapt.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's a great place to wrap things up, I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
So for all of you out there on the road, stay safe, stay informed, and stay adaptable.
And remember, you're not alone. We're all in this together.
That's right. And we're here to support you every step of the way. Thanks for listening, everyone. Drive safe out there.
We'll catch you next time.
See ya.
Bye.